Y-Vonne Hutchinson, globetrotter, speaker, entrepreneur, tech, tech, techtrepreneur, innovator. I think I said speaker. I'm gonna say it again. Author, um, eclectic individual. Y-Vonne, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a beautiful morning, and I'm blessed to be up tackling the day. So I'm good.
Let's talk a little bit about the landscape. I feel like you and I connected initially back in I had you on the pod. I was looking at the schedule. So I feel like I've had you on the
Yeah.
pod like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. Yeah. You legit, like, I feel like I'm a regular on the pod. Legit. Yeah.
Because I feel like, so I'm looking at the schedule. I see you back on here like in 2021. I feel like you was on here before that. But
Maybe.
maybe.
That might have been the first time, though.
It is also 2025. So like that might have been the
Yeah.
first time.
That was 4 years ago.
That was a grip ago.
Yeah.
I think I know at that time we were talking about your firm, Ready Set, and talking about the work that you were leading and doing then, and just like the landscape of DEI. Let's talk a little bit about like where Ready Set was then in 2021 versus where Ready Set is today in 2025.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy to talk about it. I mean, a lot has changed. A lot has changed. I think in 2021, we were still sort of in the post George Floyd era of everybody wanting to do something. Now, we can hold and say like what those things were and were they all beneficial things, but everybody wanted to do something, communicating some sort of stance, some sort of progress on DEI. And then at that time, we were just starting to see the hints of the backlash that would be coming. But I don't think we had any idea how severe it would be. So I would say the Ready Set that you see today is, I think, a little bit older and wiser Ready Set, a Ready Set that's evolved too in thinking through what works for organizations, what doesn't, and a Ready Set that is reacting to a different moment, a fundamentally different moment, and supporting organizations in different ways. I'll also say, outside of what we traditionally think about as DEI, and I define that as sort of thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to things like race, disability, et cetera. We are in an environment that is much more in flux and where people need to be supported in different ways. So, and we're thinking about the question of organizational resiliency a lot more. So I think in 2021, you were still sort of seeing this economic and political environment that was more stable than it is right now, right? And, I think the disruptions of COVID was disrupting in 2020 as we all went to work in our homes, but the ripple effects were again just started to be felt in 2021. I think we were starting to see more severe impacts from like climate change, climate disruption. There's just disrupting the ability of people to physically be in a space and be safe in a predictable way. We had not yet sort of seen the political backlash that we see, and then economically, we were still kind of like riding the wave of the low interest rates and the unabashed growth and all of that, and so we had not really seen, we had not experienced this environment in a downturn. So I think the ways that we were approaching some of the core questions of how do we equip people to have a healthy experience at work were in a lot of ways fundamentally different than what they are today.
Yeah, it's interesting because I recall, so much of the work, I'm speaking from LivingCorporate's perspective, there was a lot of interest around, hey, look, let's highlight our Black and brown talent. Let's help us tell better stories. And not to say that those things don't still exist. Like shout out to Intuit as a multi-year partner for us, and We have some other really great relationships. However, the spirit of it was just much more prevalent and engaged. And it was more around even like more like ornamental work, and like really excited to spend dollars on that, and just to even just in the name of like good PR, just to do that. Whereas now I see it's more around, hey, how can you help us save money? Like if we spend money with you, what are you saving us somewhere else? And it's just much more, the operational elements of it are much more explicit now, and the pressure to prove return on investment, and again in very tactile ways, not in theoretical ways. It's just much more prevalent and on the nose now. I'm curious.
Which I don't think is a bad thing, actually. I you know what I mean? I feel like, I don't know how you felt in those early days, but something, in some ways that the work was performative, right? And I think there is, not to say there's so much power in storytelling, and you all have done an amazing job of highlighting Black and Brown achievement, but that in the sort of absence of structural reform and structural work, very limited, and thinking, not necessarily thinking about it in terms of business outcomes. I think there's a moral imperative to the work that we do, but our clients are businesses. So there's a business imperative as well. And so being able to make those connections, to actually quantify the value, to actually talk about like realistically how this work impacts business, which it does, right? I think when you're up here and you're kind of like at the high level floofy stuff, which I'm not saying that's all we did, but you don't get to the actual tangible meat of it. And in some ways you do yourself a disservice, because that inherently devalues the work that you do, right? When we start saying, you know what, we're seeing it right now in the space, you don't want to be a target. You know what I mean? Like, and when I say target, I mean target as in the retailer. Like there's a really big business case that we're seeing related to DEI work that I think it is helpful for us to acknowledge, and in some cases lead with, because it is so valuable.
No, 1,000%. And I mean, it's interesting because I recall during that time, like in the 2021, 2022, like I kept on saying like, hey, this is great. Like, we're happy to do this. We have this learning platform, and we also do data transformation work, and we do this other. And there was less of an interest in that. Whereas like now, when I think about our portfolio of services, I think there's like, we lead more with the learning platform. We lead more with the data. And then there's some interest on the brand storytelling side. But like telling that connected or presenting that connected value proposition just wasn't really of much interest back then. And I think it's interesting how things have so aggressively shifted and changed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's part of what enabled Ready Set to be resilient. And I think that's also part of, looking ahead to Super Essence, which is my new company that I'm incredibly excited to talk about, what makes it a really great value proposition as well, right? And Ready Set, we've always sort of leaned into the data. That has been like a core part of our ethos, and really tying in the work that we do to tangible outcomes, and going beyond the traditional limits or the limits that other people wanted to pose on us in terms of how we talk about DEI, to really thinking through something that feels more holistic, and that impacts the ability of an organization to be resilient and to fully leverage and serve all of the people working within its walls, which at the end of the day, no matter how you cut it, are its most important asset. You still can't run a business without people. AI can do a lot. I have an AI company. You can't run a business on AI. And so I think it's, being able to have that in our ethos early on was, I think, a key to our resiliency in this moment. And I can say now with Super Essence, where we really start to dig into the data, that's where we're seeing the value, because like we're able to say quantifiably, this is what is impacting your ROI. These are like, you take the sort of soft bits of data that we work with, and I don't want to say this soft and hard data, but you take that engagement data, you take that experience data, and you're able to connect it to tangible outcomes and to real dollars. Makes a difference. That's what people want. That's how you run a business. And so I think that's in both of our histories, and that's what positions us well today.
No, I agree. I think to your point about like AI can't do everything. It's so interesting. Like they're in this landscape right now, and it happens like every. I don't know. I feel like it's cycling faster and faster, but like there's these moments where like people present this technology, whatever this technology may be, it's like this like
Yeah.
cure all miracle thing that can do everything, presented by a bunch of white tech bros, a group of people historically who have never actually innovated anything. Now you have like Steve Jobs, like Steve, and then Woz over at Apple. You know those guys. I can point to probably like 7 people in that demographic that have like really actually built something tangible and real. But like for the past like what decade and a half, whatever, like just been a lot of recycling or kind of just exploiting people from the global south. And like a lot of what we see in generative AI is that. And so I think it's important. I like the fact that brands like Super Essence are owning like, hey, this is a value prop. It can't do literally everything. There's going to be a human element interaction with it. And the fact that the future of work is still going to have people in it. I think like there's like this technocratic like fever dream by like Peter Thiel and other people who like think that, I don't know, there's just going to be like this permanent serf class that's just on like serving these like 8 tech oligarchs, and it's like that's a terrifying world. You know what I'm saying? Like people still have to be the center of whatever we're talking about. And people have a heavy element in business. Like people have a heavy element in delivering value, and people are going to be the main people who are going to experience the value. Like it gets kind of weird sometimes, Y-Vonne. It's like, yo, like we're building all these AI bots and stuff. It's just bots. It'll be AI talking to AI. You know what I'm saying? Like what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually that's one potential future. There's a lot in what you just said that I want to unpack. And I think the first of which has to do with the hype cycle and separating the hype cycle from the reality of innovation, right? And so when you think about what we've seen with like Web3 and NFTs and now AI, like there's a constant, like the path to the gold rush is getting faster and faster and faster. And I think that reflects actually the need to have a hype cycle when you have a VC backed industry that is pushed to show scale and returns super quickly, right? It returns that may not necessarily be associated with enterprise value or revenue generation or the reality of the marketplace in which a business is operating. I mean, that's why the hype cycle exists. But I think that being said, there is real space for innovation. And I would push back on the idea that that the white dudes haven't innovated. I think that, as much as I really am saddened and angry about how narrow the space of who gets to innovate is, I think there's still innovation that happens. What I think is also happening is a failure of imagination. So what happens when you have a very narrow subgroup of people that are like sitting on some interesting stuff is their view of how that can be applied and scaled and leveraged to improve the overall human condition is incredibly limited and gets diluted and reduced by the pressures of, again, the VC marketplace and the sort of extractive ideals of capitalism and conquest that I think are inherent in some of their values. So, I think in many cases, the story of Silicon Valley is the story of missed opportunity. And, I think you talk about sort of like the vision of consolidation and monopolies and 6, 7, 8 companies that we all work for as serfs because we don't have a choice. And I think that there's another vision that I also love, which is the vision of fragmentation and ownership and getting to like AI, which is where my focus is right now, is I think that there's a real opportunity in AI. The temptation is going to be able to sell it as a panacea because that's exactly what you're doing. You're selling it, right? And in order for it to sell, to VCs, it has to be that. But I think the reality of it is that AI is in an era of fragmentation. My view, I see AI like I see like a personal computer, the personal computer in the 80s, right? Yeah, there are like a couple of big dogs. You know, you had your IBMs and your Microsoft, like not Microsoft, but you had your IBMs and your other big players that were the only ones making that technology. And it seemed like it was locked in and the future was locked into those players. But then eventually what you saw is like, no, like people figured out how to make it cheaper. They figured out how to make it faster. They figured out how to make it. Yeah. And so then we all got one. And so it stopped, the computer itself stopped being the competitive advantage. And it was like what you put into it and who was operating it and what kind of outcomes you could make with it. And I kind of see AI and in particular LLMs in the same way, right? We're just by the minute, you know, new technology is coming out and it's getting cheaper and faster to do, and business models are crumbling and business models are rising. And I think there's real opportunity here for ownership to reshape how we think about knowledge, to think through how we get more efficient in the knowledge work that we do, and to think through in some ways to amplify bias, but in some ways to reduce it as well. You know, what Super Essence does is we leverage AI to really think through how people, as we're talking about, experience organizations. You know, that is the most impactful part of any organization's bottom line. Whether we're talking about if your employees are staying or going and can you hire, whether we're talking about, you know, how consumers see your brand and who's gonna become a customer, and then how customers experience you. Like there's real space for us to take the bias out of that measurement. The human bias is often implicit in it, to take our faulty measurement tools like surveys, which are just rife with bias, and to have a more thorough, comprehensive, and actionable view on what that human experience is, enabling us to make better decisions that drive better business outcomes, right? That's like how I see something like AI coming into the mix, right? Like you're not going to replace it. Like you can actually make the experience better for people, right? Like let's not replace humanity, but like augment it, improve it. Because at the end of the day, you know, companies still need people to buy their stuff. Like, you know, you still need people to work for you. There is no future, without that.
I think I have like, because I just probably watch too many like dystopian futuristic movies. Like I do think about like this other world where like people are just like in constant debt and like we just, I don't know, it's very weird. But I agree with you. Obviously, like I think like AI is really meant to enhance employee experience and enhance experience, period, as opposed to replace experience.
Yeah.
I think about like when I think of, and like we are going to talk about Super Essence. I hear you plugging it throughout this conversation. That's fire. I'm gonna give you. We're also gonna talk about it. Yeah, we're also gonna talk about it. But I was thinking about like when I think about AI, like more like practical use cases. I think about ways in which like it can synthesize large, unstructured, qualitative data. Like that to me is like a really healthy and helpful way to use this technology. Right? Like, hey, I don't know, 20,000 hours of interview files or I got all, to your point, I got all this open text sentiment data. Like, like let me figure how can we organize this by theme and like what are some recommendations against what I feed you so you can kind of like to me those things make sense. I think I get nervous about this world, kind of like in WALL-E. In WALL-E, like everybody was just fat, right? No bone density. And they were just eating and consuming all the time. And it's like, we have to imagine a world where like this actually helps us go outside more. Like where this helps us, like this does not replace our thinking, it enhances our thinking. You think about like all these articles and reports out about how like people are asking like, yo, are people getting dumber? Like what's going on with our critical thinking? And so I think there's like this, I do wonder if there's a future where there's a group of people who are leveraging AI to really just kind of like mollify the public, and there's a group of people who are leveraging technology to really enrich experience. And I do believe that those are going to be two like fairly distinct factions.
Yeah.
However, let's talk about Ready Set to Super Essence, like probably like business nerd in me slash like just curious podcaster. Why Super Essence as its own entity and not Super Essence as a tool within the Ready Set um, environment or ecosystem?
Okay. Yes, just sorry. I
You
think
good?
there's two parts to your question that I want to answer, and I actually want to go back to what you were just saying about the sort of your vision of AI, because I want to just share something that I have that I'm starting to work on and in conversation with that I think is a powerful antidote as we sort of calibrate our vision. I do a lot of work in New Zealand, as you know, and we've been in conversations quite a bit about what constitutes knowledge and the preservation of knowledge. And in New Zealand, there's a deep, rich history with the indigenous folks here, the Maori folks, and thinking about the differences between the Maori way, not just of like, um, uh, of values, but conceptualizing the world around them. And there's a space for AI, for an LLM to capture that in its reasoning and its way of thinking and to amplify that knowledge. What does it mean to have an indigenously rooted LLM? Right? Like, that's a question we're asking ourselves, right? Like, and in some ways, a lot of indigenous cultures have really struggled to record, capture, and spread their knowledge, limited by the scale of like humanity, right? And what people can do. That's why languages are dying. If you're able to scale that with technology, I think there's something very powerful there. So that's just one example of like a way in which the fragmentation of AI, the technology of AI itself, could totally break the mold, right? Like,
Word.
being able to capture and scale indigenous knowledge is something that's like super exciting. Not necessarily not going to get you VC money, but I think it's a way to think about this technology in an expansive and preservationist lens. So just wanted to offer that as an alternative vision.
Hold on, and before you get to so first of all, I agree. I think that's super fire. I think like it takes like that level of creative. I think it takes a different degree of creativity into your earlier word imagination to think about this technology in just more expansive and like non-extractive, exploitative ways. To that end, let me ask a follow up since you said that. So like I've been said, I believe VC as a whole is a scam, but do you think it is? But do you think that VC like there are people I follow like who basically are on the mind that like, especially as we look at this moment, but it's kind of been on its way. Like, are we experiencing like the heat death of VC? Like in terms of like, are we seeing like the end of it? Like, do you see a world where like capitalism on Barry Allen flash level speed can continue?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think we're at a fork in the road. So I think I will absolutely say I think there are cases in which VC works and is needed, right? So I want to hold that, but I don't think it's right for every case. And I think that the sort of natural accumulation of like a capitalist growth at all costs model for business across the board is what we're seeing right now, which is consolidation, power grabs, and an attempt to extract wherever you can. And so I think in some ways, as we look at the increasing relationship between our political environment, our political class, and the VC class, which is economic, um, that's like just sort of a natural evolution of um, uh, business actors that are interested in accumulating power at all cost, right, and accumulating wealth at all costs, and have reached the sort of throes of wealth extraction. And I think it can go one of two ways, right? You can sort of have these folks that continue to extract and then start to extract from more common people, eventually they're going to compete against each other, however. And I think that there's also something there. I don't think that we can continue on this road, to answer your question, right? I think that VC is not a model for all business. I think that there needs to be a space for better regulation. I think that antitrust is vital and important to this economy and kind of antithetical to the VC model in some ways. And I think that if we're going to continue to innovate, in some ways, we need to fragment. So I would say I see a world where VC is part of a mixed like economic ecosystem where there are other sources of capital, whether that's traditional lending, bank loans, whatever, where it doesn't take as much capital to start a business, right? Like you don't need VC to get off the ground. Mm-hmm. And that VC doesn't continue to be an innovation killer in that it also kills competition. So like, right. If you don't have it, you're screwed from jump. Like, I think that we need a world where there's more options in terms of access to capital for entrepreneurs that want to build businesses. And also, I think there's a world in which businesses get to profitability that has to be right away, right? Like we're also seeing, I think this extractiveness is also directly tied to the fact that businesses can afford to not be businesses for years.
Right.
Right? No shade, but for years they don't make a profit and they're floated by this VC money, which again skews the competitive, skews competition.
It just jacks everything up, Y-Vonne. Like you think about you think about like Uber, like all these tech, all these apps, Uber Eats, DoorDash, all these things, like they seem so cheap for us, and it was a great experience. Because they were subsidized by the government or subsidized by big VC. So they was running it to your point, tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. And it's like, come on, man. And my thing is, it's like, hey, this service was actually a super dope good, public good. Maybe it can continue at this price point if we just change our model and we don't operate just so extractively, because the reality is it's only we only are really the individual, right? This is not about turning into some type of Marxist manifesto podcast. I'm just trying to speak to the reality that you see these huge multi-billion-dollar organizations benefit from corporate support, from large institutional investment to the public good, but then but individuals can't get that same type of support. It's to your point in business, so many Black and brown entrepreneurs. I had him too. I had Toby on the pod a while ago, and we were talking about just VC while Black, VC while other, and the reality is that a lot of these startups don't actually need VC. They might just need $50,000 or $100,000. They just need a loan. Right, they might just need a partner. They don't necessarily need somebody. They don't need the pressure of needing to scale and be $1 billion. Some of these businesses aren't even. A lot of these businesses are not even designed to be $1 billion companies. Right, some of these businesses are designed to be 7-figure companies, 8-figure companies, and that should be okay. But this pressure, to your point of needing to scale so rapidly and then also dilute your own ownership to the point where you don't even have anything at the end, it just kind of sucks.
Yeah, and I want to I think that again, so much in what you just said. I think that so I want to go to the Uber example, but then I want to go to the ownership example and what that means for us as entrepreneurs. So I think the Uber example is actually kind of compelling because what Uber did was actually displace a public good. We talk about the public good. Uber displaced public infrastructure with private. Right. And so then what they were able to do, they undercut the market until they captured it. And then they rose their prices. And then consumers had less options as opposed to more. right? Let's talk about it, right? And then also we saw things that were sort of reliant. I'm just in Bay Area thinking about what happened to BART and public transportation in the Bay Area when those revenues declined and that transportation system took a real hit. And then we also saw traffic increased, and there were these sort of big quality of life hits as well. And then once there's less of that public good, then Uber raised the prices, and then who gets access to transportation, reliable transportation, actually decreases, right? And so I think there's a way to think about the intersection of public good and private markets that's nuanced and robust, and doesn't always depend on a private actor coming in, capturing market share, and privatizing a public good, because that's only going to benefit, at the end of the day, a very small subset of people. Now, on the other side of it, I was just going to answer your second question, which, as thinking about this from an entrepreneurial perspective, I have a lot of baggage from Ready Set for a lot of reasons. Obviously, Black woman, DEI, just bullseye on my face, right? But then also the idea that for so long, Ready Set is like a profitable business, a growing business, a business that was bootstrapped. And I was told every step of the way that it was not a real business or a significant business. And, that I feel like it takes a lot of work to build your business, you know what I mean? And profitable at that scale, period. Right. And I think for a long time, I doubted myself as an entrepreneur because I didn't have VC funds. Yeah, it changed. We did a small seed round. And we got some help, and we got a little bit of rocket fuel to kind of take off. But, before that, I just felt like I wasn't taken seriously. And, it was very difficult for me, like feeling like I had really built something, with that in mind. So I'll say that. And now building Super Essence, I also see the other side of the coin, that founders do need venture capital, right? Because, for me, building a technology company, when you build that technology, it costs money, costs resources. You don't have customers right away. You're going to operate at a loss for a little while, right? And luckily, had the revenues, had the infrastructure from Ready Set that enabled me to invest in my company, in my new company. Not every entrepreneur has that, right? And we're in the middle of raising a pre-seed right now. It's going quite well, very happy with it. But, I think that we need that capital if we're going to actually continue and be competitive. So there's a space for it. I'm not saying get rid of all VC. I'm just saying we also need to be very intentional about when we use it, be mindful about who gets access to it and what that does to the innovation ecosystem. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that.
You good?
Yeah, so moving back.
No, I get it. Look, I would say, as someone who's been bootstrapped this whole time, and still people don't really take me serious. I don't really care though, because I think my standard for if I'm a serious business or not is, are we serving and honoring the mission that we have? Am I able to pay my people and my vendors on time? And I'm able to feed my family, pay my bills. I check those 3 boxes, I'm straight. However, I want to challenge something you said. You said you think that they need venture capital. I don't know if they need venture capital. They need capital. It don't necessarily have to be venture capital, right?
That's right. That's right. I think that's right.
And I think we being just entrepreneurs, and then specifically Black and brown entrepreneurs, like a little bit more broadly, is not you. I think a lot of us are because VC is the sexy, popular, overwhelmingly marketed choice, we believe we need that, when it's man, I would much rather find an angel or some type of other partner who is willing to invest X, and we identify and align on those terms. And I think I'm looking for, and again, I'm not against, no, that's not true. I probably am against VC because I said it was a scam earlier. I'm gonna be consistent with my takes. However,
You
let's
you
just say
really did say it was a scam earlier.
it is a scam. But here's the thing, like, but let's just say like I also think that the world is run and built on scams. So like that's not like the end of the world. Let's say like VC does still exist. I agree with you that it's a small sliver of a larger pie of other of funding and capital options, right? And I think what I'm curious about, especially as the terms that VCs operate in are going to become increasingly stringent for entrepreneurs, my hope and frankly, just logical expectation is that other options become more available because, I mean, we got to figure out some other options.
And let's be real. We are two Black people in conversation. Like sure. The likelihood, you know how much money Black people raise, right? Mm-hmm. And that the amount of VC funding going to Black entrepreneurs is declining. It's not increasing.
Correct.
So I think like we have to find other options. Like we have no other choice. So I think like let's hold that too, is that even if, you know, all things aside, yes, I think it's good we don't have to rely on VC. We should remember that. But also we might just need to build businesses counting on the fact that we're not going to get it.
Correct. Right. That's where I'm coming from is now, again, Living Corporate did not start as me trying to make a business. Living Corporate started as a podcast. And then we added on the learning platform. We added on some of our, you know, our professional services with data transformation. However, like, I still don't know if I ever went into a space just thinking, you know, hey, I'm gonna get these rounds off, right? Like, and salute to the people that can do that and who have the networks to do that. I think that, to your point about the data and what it shows, how few Black people specifically, and even more specifically, Black women get VC dollars. Like I just think it's a fool's errand. However, this is not a podcast. Well, no, it's a podcast with Y-Vonne Hutchinson. I know say it ain't a podcast about VC, so it's whatever. However, I do want to talk about Super Essence a bit more. So it's interesting, like, and looking at Super Essence, and I did ask this question before. I'm going to ask it again, but I'm going to change it a little bit. So Ready Set really exists in this, like, space of really being, like, that consultative partner to help organizations in their, I'm going to say in their, like, experience and just fairness challenges. Obviously, operating as a DEI firm, it was like one of two firms that I would always recommend to my network. Now it's one of one firm I recommend to my network. And again, like when I think about Living Corporate, especially as it existed and early, we were on like the brand storytelling side. And when we told people off top, hey, we're really not going to be that ongoing partner, that consultative partner to help you like transform anything. Like we don't do consulting in that regard. And then the same really goes even for our data analytics stuff. Like, yeah, we're going to provide assessments and visualization and give you longitudinal analysis and all these different pieces. However, if you're looking for like an actual consultant, like a consulting firm who's going to like help with like your leadership transformation or those different things, that just is not what we do. I'm curious, like when I look at Super Essence and I look at like what it offers and what it does as it pertains to answering all sorts of questions about your organization, and it really being a tool to help it create insight and information against the data that you provide. Like, why is Super Essence sitting outside of Ready Set as its own entity versus like a subdomain or a product within Ready Set?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. One, I think Super Essence, the scope of what Super Essence is a little bit broader than what Ready Set does, right? So we're sort of looking at all aspects of experience across an organization. So there's just a scope question. Pretty reliably, Ready Set sells into CHROs. Occasionally we do sell into brand and marketing. We do quite a bit of that work, actually. But for the most part, we're thinking about it on the employee side. And I think Super Essence doesn't do that. That's the first part. But then from a purely tactical perspective, having now done both, which I would not recommend, building a product company is fundamentally different than building a services company. And we had to answer the question early on. We spun Super Essence out. So for a while it did sit within Ready Set. But we had to answer the question, if we really want this platform to be a success, how do we set it up? How do we set it up for success? And that was not going to be best set up for success inside of a consulting company. If you compare a product cadence to a consulting cadence, it's totally different things. Product sale to consulting sale, totally different things. The metrics we're thinking about in product, different than the metrics we're thinking about in consulting. The product culture is different from the consulting culture. And neither organization, but I think both organizations would have been diluted if Super Essence stayed within Ready Set. Like, I wanted to give Super Essence wings, and I wanted Ready Set to still be able to evolve and become what it was going to become as a consulting and services business on its own. So, that's why we decided to do it separately. And we're seeing it also, it actually opens up more opportunity, right? Because the thing that Super Essence does in its analysis is that it takes the verticals of brand experience, customer experience, and employee experience, and it looks at what's happening, not just internally, but in the world around the company, where the company is situated, what events are happening right now in the space, and analyzes risks, opportunities, and provides a set of actions for companies to take, as well as measures the data on this sort of on 10 dimensions, really, and highlight impacts, like what's happening inside the organization. And but what that means is we always wanted to build Super Essence. We wanted to give the companies the ability to action on the data in the platform. Okay, so that means we are providing that set of actions. We're also providing services in the platform, like access to our LMS, access to consulting, but we're also linking to other service providers. We can't do that at Ready Set. Like, just like off rip, I believe, let's expand the pie. I may not be referring you to my biggest competitors in the game right now. Like, there's an incentive for me not to do that. There's just a business incentive. But the incentives on the Super Essence side are different. And so I think it really also enables us to do lead generation for the consulting ecosystem in a way that we couldn't do that if it was sitting within Ready Set, right? Like, it's just, we are able to have different kind of partnerships, and we're able to think about it in a different way. We're able to internationalize and localize the platform, which we're already doing right now, in a different way. So I think that there's just some very business logistical reasons why we chose to spin it out, that fundamentally ladder up to, we think it sets it up better for growth. And enables us to approach the ecosystem in a little bit of a different way.
What are you most excited about as you think about the next 6 months? Actually, when you think about between now and the end of 2026, right? Like, you think about like everything we talked about, the landscape today economically, the tensions, the pushback against DEI, the pushback against Black and brown people, Black women specifically. As you think about like this landscape and your business within it, like, what gives you the most hope for what you're doing, and what are you excited? Like, what are you most excited about?
I think that there is something incredibly freeing about it all being out there, right? Like, it's all kind of out in the open. I hated 2022 and 2023 because the pushback that was happening against diversity, equity, and inclusion, was happening under the guise of merit, and the disingenuous idea that this is going to be better for everyone, and people are actually suffering because of this movement. And we actually see the sort of logical consequence to that now. There's something really freeing about that. We know, like, it's all out on the table. So I think that for me, that gives us space to move honestly and to talk about what the real trade-offs we're making are, and also to think critically about business, like the impact on businesses. I also think there's been this myth that, it's frivolous, it's not core to the business, like, people don't care about your values. And let's just go beyond DEI, your brand values, and your employee experience to customer experience. All those things are things that you can cut and still have a viable business because they're not core to the business. And we're finding out, baby, that's not the case.
Yeah, that's not true.
That's not the case.
I think it's also go ahead.
I just say, if you look at whose stocks are dropping, who's losing market share right now, those are people that made the wrong bets, who that believe that they made the wrong bets, and we're seeing it play out. And so I also think that the ROI, the case for, I think, is stronger now than it's been in the past. And then I'll finally say that in a time of crisis, I think, like, you know, I don't want to sound like tech bro that's like, we need to be more masculine. I'm not gonna say no names, but you know what I mean? Like, but I think that there's like strong businesses survive. And we may not always be thriving while we're surviving, but like that we're the ones that make it through. And I think there's a real space for principled leadership. I think there's a real space for doing business in a way that meets the needs of people. I think that, to our earlier question about the VC model and how it is in some ways collapsing, there's space for other business models to come into play, or even more like just more sustainable businesses to come into the conversation. So I think all of that gives me a lot of hope, but I think we're also in really dangerous times, and it behooves us to recognize that.
I think so too. I mean, and to your point, I mean, there's like this. So I'm 35 now. I was thinking about like when I was like in my late 20s, and I would like run into people that looked like me, people that didn't look like me, who were like a little older. Maybe they were like directors or even VPs, but they were just like really scary. They were like really, really cowardly, like just would not speak up and not leverage their voice. And then that would often be positioned to me as like some degree of wisdom, that like just like sitting on your values, not being courageous, not advocating for yourself or others was seen as some type of virtue. And that, and almost like you only have so many of these chips, so you got to wait to cash them in. I think I've come to reject, I rejected it at the time, but I wondered if that was just me being like, was that just like youthful hubris at the time? And not to say that I'm not like still somewhat young, but I'm older enough now to be like, no, that's just bullshit. And like, I don't think that courage is like this, like, I don't think it's like a currency. I think it's more of a muscle. And because it's weird when I see old cowards. That's weird. Because it's like, well,
the bar.
You're like 50, you're like 59. Like, you're not going to be in this corporate space much longer. Like, why wouldn't you speak up for these other employees? Like, why wouldn't you? Like, why would you just put your head down in that regard? So I 1000% agree. I believe that like the landscape, to your point about like we're seeing those bets fail. We're seeing bets against we're seeing like bets that's people that bet customer and employee experience don't matter. We're seeing those bets fail. But then also like we've yet to act, like we're just kind of getting started. So we don't actually we haven't fully even experienced the totality or like the real ramifications of people betting against people. And
that's the right. That's the way to put it. People betting against people. That's right.
Yeah. And so like, I am hopeful for those who are resilient and courageous and principled and innovative and what they do in the season. I'm excited about Ready Set. I continue to be excited about the work that you do. Before we let you go, where can people learn more about Ready Set? Where can people learn more about Super Essence?
Yes. So they can learn more about Ready Set at www.thereadyset.co. Also Ready Set on LinkedIn. I think that's where most of our socials are. And then Super Essence is www.thesuperessence.com. We learned from our previous domain buying mistakes. And you can find us on LinkedIn at Super Essence too. We're going to be at HR Transform coming up. We're out, we're in the mix. If you want to try Super Essence, you want to sign up for beta, you can do so on our website. I'm also happy to talk to people more about how we improve everybody's experience, how we put people first, and how we make better business decisions with that in mind.
Love it. It's been Y-Vonne Hutchinson, again, CEO, entrepreneur, speaker, author, globetrotter, and global trendsetter. All right. We'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks, Y-Vonne.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Peace.